My name was not always Bakhita, but no one remembers the name I had before the pain. I don't remember it either. All I know is this: before the chains, I was free. I remember the sun. I remember the warm earth beneath my bare feet. I remember laughter, the sound of my family's voices, the smell of food at the end of a long day. I was a child. I did not know fear. I did not know that a life could be shattered in a single moment. I believed the world was gentle. I believed it would always stay that way. I was about 9 years old when everything ended. There was no warning, no goodbye. Only rough hands grabbing me, strange voices shouting words I could not understand. I tried to run, I tried to scream, but my breath disappeared and my childhood fell behind me, abandoned on the dusty road. I never saw my mother again. I never heard my father's voice again. That was the day I stopped belonging to anyone. The terror was so deep that my mind began to erase things. Faces disappeared. Memories faded. Even my own name vanished. When they asked me who I was, I had no answer. So they chose one for me. They called me Bakhita, the fortunate one. They laughed when they said it. They named me as one names an object. And with that name, they took the last thing that was truly mine. From that moment on, I was no longer a child. I became something to be sold. I was sold. I was bought. I was sold again. I passed from hand to hand as if I could not feel, as if pain did not reach me, as if I had no soul. Each place was different, but the suffering was always the same. I learned quickly that crying changed nothing. I learned that obedience did not protect me. I learned that my body no longer belonged to me. There were days when we walked for hours under the burning sun, without water, without rest. If I fell, they lifted me with blows. If I made a mistake, punishment followed. I slept on the ground. I ate leftovers. And little by little, I understood something terrifying. To them, my life had no value. But the worst had not yet come. One day, one of my masters decided to mark me forever. He ordered that my skin be cut, not once, not twice, but over and over again. They used blades. They opened my flesh again and again. And when the blood flowed, they rubbed salt into the wound so the scars would never fade. They wanted my body to carry my slavery forever. The pain was unbearable, but I did not scream, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew no one was coming. I learned that silence was my only shelter. And yet, while my body was being destroyed, something else was happening inside me. Something invisible, something unexplainable. A quiet question began to rise from the deepest part of my soul. I did not know who to ask. I did not know God. I did not know prayer. But my heart whispered the same question again and again. Why am I still alive? That question stayed with me through the years, through every beating, through every sail, through every dark night. I did not know that someone was listening. I did not know that even there, in the middle of terror and silence, I was not alone. I had learned many things as a slave. I had learned how to walk without hope. I had learned how to survive without asking questions. But there was one thing I had never learned: how to live without fear. When they told me I was being sold again, I felt nothing. By then, being sold was normal. Faces changed, voices changed. Pain stayed the same. I did not hope for anything different. Hope had always led to disappointment, but this time, something strange happened. The man who bought me did not strike me. His hands were firm, but they were not violent. His voice was loud, but not cruel. I waited for the first blow. It never came. I waited for the shouting. It did not happen. My body stayed tense for days, weeks, months, expecting pain at every moment. It was harder than the suffering. Because pain I understood, kindness I did not. I was taken far from the land I knew, across waters so wide they seemed endless. The air smelled different, the sky felt unfamiliar. Everything told me I no longer belonged anywhere. I had crossed into a world that did not know my story, did not speak my language, did not see my scars. This man was Italian. To him, I was still property, but something had shifted. I was no longer beaten, no longer humiliated. I was given clothes, I was allowed to rest, and yet I remained a slave, just a quieter one. There were nights when I could not sleep. Silence frightened me more than screams ever had. In silence, memories returned. In silence, I heard the cries I never released. My body was free from blows, but my soul was still chained. Then came another unexpected turn. I was brought to a place where women dressed differently. They spoke gently. They looked at me, not through me. They smiled, not because they owned me, but because they saw me. These women were called sisters, Canossian sisters. I did not understand who they were, but something about them made my heart uneasy. They spoke of things I had never heard before. They spoke of love as if it were real. They spoke of forgiveness as if it were possible. And then they spoke a name, Jesus. At first I listened from a distance. I had learned not to trust stories. But the story was different. They spoke of a God who chose to suffer, a God who allowed his body to be broken, a God who was whipped, mocked, chained, and crucified. As they spoke, my heart began to beat faster because I knew that pain. I recognized that humiliation. I understood those wounds. For the first time in my life, suffering had a face that was not cruel. They said he had done it out of love. They said he had forgiven those who hurt him. They said he had never abandoned the broken. I did not interrupt. I did not ask questions. But something inside me began to open slowly, cautiously, like a door that had been locked for years. Could it be true? Could there be a God who had been with me when no one else was? At night, alone, I began to think. I thought of every step I had taken barefoot, every wound on my body, every time I had asked myself why I was still alive. And for the first time, an answer began to form, not in words, but in peace. Maybe I had not been forgotten. Maybe my suffering had been seen. Maybe I was not alone after all. They told me this God knew my name. That thought broke me, because I had forgotten my own name, but he had not. Slowly, fear loosened its grip. Not all at once. Fear does not leave easily. But it no longer ruled me. And in its place came something fragile, something new, trust. I did not yet know what it meant to be free. But for the first time, I wanted to find out, and that desire, that quiet longing for a God who suffers with the wounded, that would change everything. For most of my life, freedom was a word I did not understand. I had seen it taken from me before I could even name it, but when I finally tasted it, I realized something greater. True freedom does not begin when chains fall from the body. It begins when chains fall from the soul. When I asked to be baptized, I was not asking for a ritual. I was asking for a new life. I was asking to belong not to a master, not to fear, but to a God who had walked my road barefoot. The day I entered the water, I rose with the name I had chosen, Josephine. A daughter, at last, not owned, not broken, loved. Soon after, my former owner came to reclaim me. He spoke of papers, of rights, of possession. For the first time in my life, my voice did not tremble. I said no. I stood still as the law spoke for me. I was declared free. Not temporarily, not conditionally, forever. And in that moment, I understood something that still takes my breath away. I had been freed once by the law of men, but long before that, I had already been freed by the love of God. I chose religious life not to escape my past, but to redeem it. I served quietly. I cooked. I cleaned. I opened doors. I smiled. People often asked about my scars. I told them they were reminders not of cruelty, but of mercy. I did not hide my story. I transformed it into prayer. When people asked me how I could forgive, I answered with truth, because I was forgiven first. I often said words that shocked those who heard them. If I were to meet those who kidnapped me, I would kneel and kiss their hands, because without them, I would not have known Jesus. This was not weakness, this was victory. Hatred had tried to claim my heart and failed. In my final years, my body grew tired, but my soul rested in peace. Sometimes memories returned. On my deathbed, I cried out, "The chains. Please take the chains away from me." And then silence came. And in that silence, I smiled. On February 8th, 1947, I crossed the final threshold. The world had once called me a slave. The church would one day call me a saint. In the year 2000, I was raised to the altars, not to glorify suffering, but to proclaim hope. To remind the forgotten that God sees. To tell the wounded that their pain is not wasted. To whisper to every broken heart, no chain is stronger than love, no scar is greater than grace. No past is beyond redemption. My life began in chains. But it did not end there. It ended in freedom. It ended in love. It ended in God. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel and keep walking with us through stories of faith, hope, and lives transformed by God's love. Each story is a reminder that no matter where you come from, your life has meaning and God is still writing your story. Stay with us. There is so much more to discover.